Hey, you witches, how you doing today? We're coming to you with a apothecary update, a witch's apothecary update. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Taya. Welcome to the channel where we talk about all things witchcraft, and special to my heart is traditional witchcraft. And for those of you who are returning viewers, maybe coming in from another video, welcome back. Thank you so much for your support. It's really appreciated. And all of you, please consider subscribing. It's a great way to help us build the channel. So an apothecary update. I have lots to update you on, and I've had lots of, well, not lots of, but I've had a few questions about sort of how I identify my herbs, like how do I know what I'm working with, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the process. But first, before we get started, I wanted to share with you, I'm really excited. So for those of you who maybe follow me on Instagram or are part of our guild Facebook, you will have seen some posts lately where I foraged some rowan berries. So these are a little different. I'm not putting them straight into the apothecary, but I've actually made this beautiful string of, I have a number of strings now I've made of rowan berries on red thread, which is a protective charm. And if you actually look at rowan berries, I don't know that it's going to show it so well. Can you see it's got a little star? The little end here makes like a little star. So each one has a little pentacle on it, and that's why they're protective. And I'm going to hang these in windows. So all I did was take a piece of red craft thread, and I put a dried rowan berry on the bottom. I have some dried rowan berries from before. Tied that to the bottom and then just strung the whole thing up and made this beautiful string. So I was just going to hang just like this in my window, and that will be a protective charm around my house. So that was one way that I kind of use some of my foraging, was to do, still have a ton of rowan berries left, and I've already made like 2 of those garlands. I've made a big 6-foot garland for my big front window. I've made a necklace, and I still have rowan berries left. So I would probably dry those and use them. They will go into my apothecary next, but they need to be dried first. So basically, once I've gone out and I foraged something, and how do I decide what to forage? I guess that's the first question, is where do we start with this? For me, I just see something interesting. I see a pretty flower. I see something that sort of speaks to me, and I'm like, oh, what's that? Looks interesting. And I have an app on my phone that I use to identify it. So it's called Plant Snap. There's a number of different plant identification apps that you can get. I use Plant Snap, and I'll use that to identify what the plant itself is. And then I'll harvest it, I'll bring it home, I'll dry it out, and I'll bottle it up, which I'm going to show you right away. I've got some to do. I've got some tansy to do. And then I'll worry about the correspondences afterward. I just forage stuff locally that speaks to me. So I'm not necessarily going out looking for something in particular. I mean, I could be, right? But for the most part, I'm looking for new and exciting stuff to add to my apothecary. So really, that's where I start. I don't start with the correspondences. That comes later. So what I do is I bring it home and I dry it out, and I end up with a bundle somewhat like this. So this is tansy. And yeah, I tie it at the end with a bit of craft string, and I hang it up in my window, and they just hang in the window until they are all nice and dry, just like this. And then I take a bottle, and I don't know if you can see, I've already put a label on it. I just have these clear labels, like I have a label maker. It says tansy. And all I'm gonna do, I know this is kind of off camera here, but I'm just going to snip the little ends off and add them into my jar. And we'll eventually just fill this jar right up with tansy, and it will be added into the apothecary. So this is one of the things I got while I was out sort of circling around. And yeah, so that's all we do. It's pretty straightforward. But now I'll tell you right now, I don't know what I'm going to use tansy for. It was just something that spoke to me, that was interesting, and I was like, oh, hey, let's take some of this home. I'd love to work with it. How I'm going to do that comes later. So let's first go through, I'll walk you through some of the stuff and where I found it, what I've kind of, added to my apothecary over this past summer. And aside from the tansy. And then we'll go from there. So to start off with, I do grow some things in my yard. So, and some things I find. So I have a couple of moths here. My husband drives a big truck, and every time we go on a camping trip or whatever, when we come home, I'm the like neighborhood witch. I'm out there looking all over the grill of his truck for moths. And I found 2 really nice ones this year. I didn't kind of get into that until later in the summer, or else I probably would have had more. But yeah, so I have 2 little moths. There's a yellow one and a white one. 2 little moths in here. They're all nice and dried out. What else do we have? Some fallow dirt. So I was making, what is it called? Death oil of Blood and Bones by Kate Froiler. And one of the ingredients is graveyard dirt or fallow dirt. Fallow dirt being dirt that nothing grows in. And we actually have a spot in our yard, in the middle of our lawn, in the back, where it's literally a perfect square where the sod went down, and for whatever reason, this piece of sod did not take, and nothing has ever grown in around it. Like, it's just this perfect rectangle off on the side of our yard. So I harvested some fallow dirt from there that I used for that recipe, and I thought I'll keep the rest because you never know when I might need it. And in the middle of winter, I can't be going out finding more fallow dirt because it's covered in, 5 feet of snow. I have juniper berries. So these are, I actually harvested these at the very beginning of the summer. They had actually dried out on the juniper bush, and I just have juniper in my yard, so there's that. Citronella. So I get a citronella plant every year. It just smells beautiful. I have it on my back deck. And so I clipped off a whole bunch. And this I actually dry, the citronella I dry in the stove because it is very thick and almost a woody texture to the leaves. And so if you just leave it out, it takes forever to dry. So this I do in my oven, which I set at like 200 degrees. And I put it on racks. I just put it on like a the trays that you use, the racks that you use when you bake cookies, one of those racks, and I just kind of slot the little leaves down through each hole, and then I put that into the oven. And finally, from my yard, I have marigold, and I'm actually excited. I have a whole bunch more that's just drying right now from the last of the plants. So marigold is calendula. Very common ingredient. So I have orange and yellow, and this jar will be absolutely full. So you see, sometimes I have to use a pickle jar. They're not always like fancy jars. What else do we have? Okay, so then we were camping, and I had some cow parsnip. Just some big cow parsnip leaves. It would have been nice to get the roots, but we were camping in a provincial park, so I'm not even really supposed to be harvesting the leaves, never mind digging up plants, so I didn't get the roots. I have aster. Aster is a little teeny tiny blue flower. It's quite pretty. When it dries, it almost poofs, and the leaves turn into just these little tiny dots. So there's little tiny blue dots on all of these. Then I have goldenrod. Funny story, I was actually going to sit with you guys and package this all on video, and I started filming it and had a massive allergic reaction. Like, it gets in my eyes and my eyes swell shut. I'm very allergic to seasonal stuff. So that video got scrapped. So we're doing it with everything in jars, so I don't have an allergic reaction. But this is the goldenrod, which I'm sure is what I had the reaction to. And finally, I have fireweed. I don't know if you can see, they're like pretty little, they're pretty purple flowers. They're very, very purple. And again, those were all from our camping trips this summer. And then what else did I have to add? So this is from going on walks around my neighborhood. I'm always keeping my eye out for interesting stuff. And this is where the bulk of my foraging probably comes in. I have wasp's nest. So it's actually just pieces of, like, there was just a chunk of wasp's nest laying in an alley once that I found. Some pussy willows. There is a tree just across the street from me, and earlier in the summer, right when it first starts blooming, all those big beautiful pussy willows, I just pick the ones up. It's in somebody's yard, so I just pick the ones up that fall off the tree and are on the boulevard, so I don't have a ton of them. But again, it's just a few to add to the apothecary. I have puffballs. These are always a mystery to me. These little puffballs, and if you squeeze it, it's full of there's spores. It's a little brown and it makes like a smoky brownness. We have spurge. Spurge, which is actually a little yellow flower, but when I dried it, the flowers got kind of mixed in with all the green, so it's all the flowers and the green leaves together of a plant called spurge. I have acorns. We have oak trees in our neighborhood that I never knew that they were there until this year. And so I got some acorns off that oak tree. and Alberta rose. So I have like an ornamental rose that I forage in our locally, and this year I actually foraged a bit of Alberta rose flowers as well. These are very delicate. They're hard to dry because they're very, very delicate. But yeah, so this is like a true rose, a true 5-leaf rose, whereas ornamental rose has like lots and lots of, it's not a true rose. So yeah, so that was kind of a little bit about all the different things that I picked up while I was out walking around this summer. So basically now that I've got it all into jars, now it's like I need to start figuring out what are the correspondences. So there's a few different ways that I do it. The first one is I just went and picked it up. So this will be my new process. I just went and picked up these 2 new books. The first one is Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. Guys, it's a great resource. I mean, I've always been meaning to pick it up. I just haven't, but it lists so much stuff, and it actually lists, oh, the dog is having fun under the table if the camera's jiggling. Sorry, guys. So there's a ton of things in here. Like, he's got tansy in here. I don't have tansy in any of my other books. I've also picked up this one here, the Boreal Herbal, because I live in a boreal forest environment. So this doesn't work for everybody in North America, but for those of us in northern Alberta, northern parts of the North America, that will work for the boreal forest, but you can probably find guides like this local. So those are the first 2, and I would look through these and try to find something. I've also got my Correspondences book, and it lists a ton of different herbals and stuff. But I mean, these are all diverse resources. If I don't find it in one of those, I will Google it. You'd be amazed what you can find by just Googling stuff. And yeah, and then I also do things like I look at where was it growing? Is it a plant that was growing in a watery environment? So not this summer. This summer was very, very dry. But the summer before was very, very wet. And I had a completely different type of weeds growing in my local neighborhood. So a lot of them have more, they have more watery type correspondences, whereas this year everything was very dry. I find a lot of them that I'm looking at tend to have fiery correspondences. Is it growing beside a pond? Then it may be watery. You know, you can look at those different things. Also, when you look at, so you know how I showed you the aster and I said it poofs up. It's almost like a dandelion. You know how a dandelion goes to like into a poof when it dries? That's a very airy correspondence, right? Whereas something like these puff balls, I'd say they're very earthy because they grow down close to the ground. They're that brown. When you push them, they kind of have that poofy smoke, but they might be a little bit fiery as well, right? Because they're sort of smoky. It could be a fiery as well. Sorry, my dog is chasing her tail. I'm very distracted, and if you can hear the claws going, I apologize. She just, you know, she lays on the couch all day until I do a video, and then she's like, woo, it's party time. So anyways, I take these, and now the next step is to start organizing all of these different correspondences. And this is something I actually have been really terrible about doing. I just had started, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna get like a recipe box. And what I did was I put, you know, aster, birch bark, I just went through, right? Catnip, all the different things that I have in my apothecary. And I thought, oh, I'll just do cards and then I'll write on the cards. Now I'm thinking the cards aren't gonna be big enough. And honestly, well, I mean, I guess I could paint this and make it, it doesn't feel very witchy. It's just a plastic box and I don't like that. So I'm thinking, what I might do is I have this big, I gotta back up, this big scrapbook album, and it's actually post-bound. So anytime you find like, if you go to like Michael's and you find, they're typically sold as photo albums now, but you open them up and you open this up and you can see there's 2 screws. You can remove those screws and then you can change the pages around. So I can actually alphabetize this as I go. And then when I have new entries, I can just open it up and slot them in. So I'm thinking I might use this now because it's got a nice big page. It's got a nice big page to it where I can have a picture, I can have correspondences, I can have a bit of a write-up, and there's lots and lots of room. So I'm thinking that's what I'm gonna be doing. I'm gonna try doing the book. I've always wanted to do the book, but I've been really hesitant, and just, you know what, I think I'm gonna go for it. And then what I'm gonna end up with is a book of plants and correspondences that I have on hand. Because it's really nice to go through, say, a correspondence book and be like, oh, this and this and this correspond, but what do I have? This way, I can go through my correspondences and it's what I have on hand, which I think is really, ideally, right, the easiest way to work is to work with what I have on hand instead of going through books that name all sorts of crazy out there herbs and stuff that I don't have, and if I want, I'm gonna have to order them online. I'd rather work with what I've actually got in my possession at the time. So that's kind of where I think I'm gonna go with that. So that's a little update on my Apothecary, what's going on with it, a couple of new books, and now it's time, you know, over the winter to start again organizing and writing up everything. And I actually have a binder where I started, but it just I never really used it, where I started with correspondences of things that I actually have myself. So that's one of my projects to work on over the winter is my herbal correspondence book about my apothecary and everything that's in it, because I do have quite a bit and it's all locally sourced. And yeah, that's just a little bit about how I do that and where it all comes from. So do you have an apothecary? How do you choose what goes into your apothecary? Do you just randomly choose? Are you particular? Do you purchase your herbs? Do you forage them? Let me know. How does it work for you? And otherwise, that's our video. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much, you guys.